I skipped my brother's Napa wedding and watched it implode on TikTok from Waikiki lays still around our necks and luau drums in the background. A few days earlier, he sent the kind of line that closes a door for good. And then at the altar, the bride's father froze the license over money questions, while the sweet slideshow snapped into bank welcome emails and a borrowed social security number as score, wedding disaster and hashed karma flooded the screen. By morning, HR and a detective were calling, and my silence had become the loudest thing in the room. I am Anthony Cole, 38, from Austin, and this is how a single text turned into a public unraveling while I stood in the Pacific surf. My phone lit with Ryan's name and a short line that felt like a door closing. Guest list finalized. Hope you understand. No hello, no why, no space for reply. I stared at it long enough for the screen to dim, then turned the phone face down and pressed my palms on the desk until the grain felt like a map under my skin. Maya came in with coffee from the place on First Street and set a cup near my keyboard. She did not ask anything right away. I told her Ryan had locked the list and I was out. The words felt flat and practiced, like I had said them before in another room. She watched my face and nodded once. She asked what I wanted to do. I said I wanted to do nothing. I wanted to let the message sit where he put it and not rush in to tidy around it. The phone rang before the coffee cooled. Linda filled the screen. Maya lifted her hand and I gave her a small go-ahead. She answered and listened while my mother spoke in that patient voice she uses when she thinks a problem is delicate. After a minute, Maya covered the mic and told me Linda was asking her to keep me calm. My mother wanted no drama in Ryan's big week. Maya said she would encourage peace. She ended the call and leaned back against the shelf with her arms folded. We both exhaled at the same time. It felt small and heavy. I opened my messages and scrolled to Jenna Park. She had asked me earlier in the week for childhood photos of Ryan for the slideshow. I told her I could pull a few more from an old album in our hall closet. She replied quick with thanks and said she was sending everything to the planner who would deliver the files to the AV crew. She added that she would keep a backup on a small USB in her purse in case the venue Wi-Fi acted up. I told her I would scan and send what I found tonight. I kept my tone even and friendly. If anyone deserved clear skies, it was the woman trying to stitch a past together for a room full of strangers. Work did not feel like work after that. I clicked through a few mock-ups without seeing them and told my team I was stepping out early. Austin heat soaked the sidewalk and made the air ripple above the hood of my car. We drove home with the windows down and the radio off. Maya rested her hand on the center console and I laid mine over it. Past the baseball fields, the sun was low and sharp the way it gets in early summer when the day refuses to end. In the kitchen, Maya slid the keys into the bowl by the door and asked if I wanted to call Ryan. I shook my head. She asked if I wanted to call my mother. I shook my head again. She opened the fridge and stood there with the cool air on her face. She said then we should dist what we want instead of reacting to what they want. The sentence settled in the room like a new piece of furniture. I said I wanted to be far away when the vows started. I did not want to sit in the same city and pretend I was all right. I wanted ocean and light and a place where no one knew my last name. We walked to the dining table and opened our laptops. I typed Oahu into the search bar without thinking, like my hands knew where to go. I pictured Waikiki and that slow wash of sound that eats the edges of a day. Maya smiled a little and said she had points saved for a trip she could not name until now. We checked dates and times and saw that we could lift off on the Saturday morning of the ceremony and land when the sun was leaning west over Diamond Head. It felt symbolic in a way that made my chest loosen. The wedding would be wine country and linen and a tight schedule. We would be sandals and salt in a long walk with no plan. I did not book anything yet. I wanted the decision to breathe before I put a credit card behind it. We closed the laptops and stood in the doorway that looks out at our small yard. The pecan tree was still and dark. Maya asked if I was sure. I said yes. I said I had spent years being the person who stays and steadies and makes the mess smaller. For once, I wanted to step out of the frame before the picture was taken. After dinner, I pulled the old cedar box from the back of my dresser and found a handful of photos that still smelled faintly of dust and paper. Ryan at 6 with cake on his cheek. Ryan in a cheap Halloween suit with fake astronaut patches. Ryan in a Little League jersey with grass stains on both knees. I scanned them and sent the files to Jenna with a short line that these might help fill the gaps. She replied within a minute that they were perfect and that the AV team would drop them into the final cut tonight. She reminded me she still had that small USB ready to go if anything failed. Maya washed the dishes and I dried them. We did not say much. The clink of plates and the hum of the air conditioner filled the room. When we finished, she wiped the counter and asked if I wanted to tell Linda about our plan now or in the morning. I said in the morning after our flights were set. I did not want to give anyone a chance to tug at the thread. I sat on the edge of the bed and scrolled back to Ryan's message. Guest list finalized. Hope you understand. I typed a reply and erased it twice. Finally, I wrote that I received his note and wished him a good weekend. I did not ask why. I did not ask for anything. I set the phone on the nightstand and turned off the lamp. In the dark, Maya slid closer and rested her head on my shoulder. I listened to the ceiling fan and the soft night sounds of our block. I thought about Jenna carefully guarding a little flash of memory in her purse. I thought about my mother dividing peace like a pie and handing me the smallest slice. I thought about water clear enough to see my own feet. I told myself that in the morning we would buy the tickets and that would be that. I let the idea carry me toward sleep simple and steady as a tide. 3 weeks before the wedding, Ryan texted and asked me to swing by his apartment and drop the ladder he had borrowed. He had given me a spare key months earlier so I could water plants and grab mail when he traveled. I went over after work with the ladder strapped into the back seat and the late sun burning the tops of the live oaks along his block. The place smelled like detergent and takeout. I set the ladder along the hall and went to the kitchen to leave the key where he liked it next to the fruit bowl. An envelope sat half open on the counter, the kind of cheap paper that goes shiny at the creases. Red letters along the top shouted past due in a polite font. The return address showed a Hillcrest Bank Visa Processing Center in Arizona. I did not pick it up. I did not take a picture. I stood there long enough to read the bank name twice so it would stick. Then I set the key down and locked the door behind me. At home, I opened my laptop at the dining table while Maya rinsed lettuce and talked about a client who wanted a brand refresh before the end of the quarter. I typed Hillcrest Bank Visa into a search bar and clicked the first page that explained terms for a card I had never held. Cash advance fees jumped out at me in sharp little percentages. Promotional balance transfers that looked generous until the clock ran out. Penalty APRs that waited like a trap door under the floorboards. None of it proved anything. It just drew a picture of what a person could do when a wedding outgrew a budget and pride outgrew sense. I closed the page and stared at the table until the wood grain blurred. Then I called. Ryan answered on the third ring with the bounce he puts in his voice when he wants to sound busy and fine. I told him I had dropped the ladder and that I had seen an envelope on the counter. I said I was not asking questions, only suggesting he pay down whatever he could before the weekend, because vendors and balances make a bad mix. He went quiet for a second and then his tone came back edged. He said I should worry about my own work. He said he did not need a lecture. He said he had it handled and hung up hard enough that the call ended before I could say fine. Maya asked from the sink if everything was all right. I said it was. I dried my hands and helped with dinner like routine could sand down the part of me that wanted to drive back and throw the envelope away for him. After we ate, we sat on the couch and put a game on mute. Messages pinged in the family thread, venue photos, a table layout, a playlist debate that turned into my mother asking if anyone had a slow song that was not sad. Later that week, Ryan sent a burst of engagement pictures shot in golden light. Everyone threw hearts and exclamation points into the stream. Maya held her phone between us so we could scroll together. A minute later, another image loaded from him, a screen capture of a seating chart draft he had been editing. At the top edge of the screen, grab a notification banner lingered where he had not cropped it out. The name read Lauren H. The preview line curled towards something private and bright. It mentioned champagne and the way he made late nights better. Maya stopped scrolling. Her eyes flicked to me and then back to the tiny banner baked into the image. She zoomed and then let it go like it had burned. Ryan did not comment. A few minutes later, he deleted the screen capture and replaced it with a clean version. We said nothing that night. Silence has a weight when you choose it. I set my phone face down and went to brush my teeth. In the mirror, I looked older than 38 for a moment, and then I looked like myself again. Back in bed, Maya slid under the covers and lay quiet on her side. I did not fill the dark with guesses. I thought about the last time Ryan and I had sat on a patio with cheap beer, and he had said he could not believe how lucky he was. I thought about how gratitude sometimes comes out of a mouth as performance, not as practice. The next day, I drove to a job site on the east side and checked in with a contractor about a sign install. I kept busy the way I do when I do not trust my temper. In the afternoon, I pulled off at a quiet street and called Ryan again. I told him I was not the police and that if he needed a short-term float to keep anything from spiraling, he should just say so. He snapped faster this time. He said I liked to make problems mine because it made me feel important. He said I was not paying for his life. I told him I had not offered to pay. I had offered to advise before he tripped a wire he could not see. He hung up with a soft click like a door closing itself. That evening, Maya and I made pasta and talked about flights. We had not bought the tickets yet, but the idea had settled into the house like a promise. She asked if I wanted to tell my mother we would be gone. I said not yet. Then her phone lit with a buzz. The family thread again. Ryan had shared a short video of the winery lawn at sunset while a quartet rehearsed. For a second, the camera tilted down and a text bubble slid across the top of his lock screen. Same name. Lauren. The message was different, simple, and somehow worse. It promised a private toast after the rehearsal. He panned the camera back to the vines as if nothing had happened. Maya put her phone on the counter and turned off the sound on the thread. She looked at me like she could read the question forming and did not want to open it. I nodded. We ate in the soft clink of forks and tried to talk about a beach we had not seen in a year. When we were done, I washed the bowls and she dried them. When the sink cleared, I wiped the counter and lined the sponge on the edge like I always do. There is a comfort in small finishes when the big ones refuse to come. I went to bed knowing two things at once. He was in trouble that looked like money, and he was moving toward trouble that looked like want. I could call him and demand honesty. I could call Linda and watch her try to balance compassion against appearances. I did neither. I let the new facts take their place with the old ones, and I chose quiet. We landed in Honolulu just after lunch, and the air met us like warm water. The jet bridge smelled faintly of plumeria and pine sol, and outside the windows the palms leaned the way they always do here, like they know a secret. At the curb, a driver called out to a family in front of us, and the father waved with the tired confidence of someone who has moved small people across time zones before. Maya squeezed my hand and said this was a good call. I believed her. Our hotel sat a few blocks off Kalakaua, close enough to hear the street, but far enough to sleep. We left our bags, traded shoes for sandals, and walked to Waikiki until the sidewalk hit sand. The water was the color I forget every time until I see it, a blue that turns green near shore and hides nothing. We waded in and stood thigh-deep while a surf school floated past in a line, boards leashed to ankles, and a coach raising his arm like a flag each time a kid popped up. I dunked my head and let the salt find every small cut I had not known about. Maya floated on her back and closed her eyes, and I watched the curve of Diamond Head hold the edge of the city like a bowl. That night we ate poke out of paper bowls and split a box of malasadas, still warm sugar powdering our fingers. We slept hard and woke in the dark to climb Diamond Head before sunrise. The trail rose in switchbacks, and the lamps along the path made small islands of light. Inside the tunnel, Maya laughed softly when the ceiling dipped and we both ducked for no reason. At the top, the wind pressed against my shirt and the world pulled itself into focus, one shade at a time. The hotels squared their shoulders below us, and the ocean unrolled to the horizon with the kind of calm that looks rehearsed. When the sun cracked open the clouds, the crowd forgot itself and breathed the same sound. We stood there until the light turned ordinary, and then we took the stairs down, thighs shaking in a way that felt earned. Back at the room, I pulled the folder of old scans onto my laptop and sent Jenna a few more pictures of Ryan. The birthday with the blue frosting stain on his shirt, the summer league jersey 2 sizes too big, the camping trip where he pretended not to be afraid of the dark. I wrote a short line that said these might help round out the early years. She replied fast and efficient. She had added everything to the shared folder for the planner and the AV team, and was carrying a backup drive on her keychain because venues sometimes trust Wi-Fi too much. I pictured her slipping the drive into a small zipper pocket and felt a simple relief. Let the technology work for once. Let something be easy. We spent the afternoon doing nothing on purpose. A nap with the curtains half open, a swim that lasted exactly until my fingers wrinkled, shaved ice that stained my tongue. When my phone buzzed, I checked only for airline notices and notes from Jenna, then set it face down again. Napa could do what it would do while we stood here at the lip of the Pacific. Near sunset, we watched the torches catch one by one along the path and wandered toward a small courtyard where a trio played slack key guitar. Couples in linen sat with umbrella drinks, and a boy in a Spider-Man rash guard danced with complete seriousness while his grandmother clapped off beat. Maya leaned her shoulder against mine, and I felt something let go inside me that had been clenched for too long. The night before the wedding, we kept it simple. Fish tacos at a counter, a slow walk back along the beach. We sat on the balcony with a single lamp on inside the room, so the glass held our reflections and the ocean beyond was only sound. My phone rested on the table between us like a quiet guest. Maya's phone lit, and I watched her face before the screen. She breathed out through her nose in that careful way she uses when she is deciding whether to share. She said Linda had sent a long message to her instead of me. It asked her to make sure I was kind and that I did not ruin my brother's day. I listened to the water for a while before I answered. I told her we would stay quiet. The words felt soul inaccurate. She nodded and put the phone face down beside mine. For a moment I pictured Linda at her kitchen table with the under-cabinet light on, thumbs moving, believing she was guiding the family toward grace. I let the picture pass. I had no appetite for translating myself to anyone tonight. A breeze pushed through the palms and carried up the smell of grill smoke from a patio below. Someone laughed and the sound rose in a clean ribbon, then broke. Maya tucked her feet under her and rested her head on my shoulder. I traced the rim of my cup with a finger and thought about how far 3 hours can be when the miles in between are exactly what you need. We did not say goodnight because the ocean was saying it for us. When we finally went inside, I set an alarm I did not need and left the balcony door open a few inches so the room could hear the waves. The sea carried us through the night and the city woke us with birds. We spent the day without clocks and let the hours slide. By late afternoon, we followed the torches to a luau near the edge of the beach. Drums rolled across the lawn. A dancer set a circle of knives on fire and the crowd made one long sound. We ate slow, sweet pork and rice and pineapple that tasted like sun. For a little while, the only story in my head was this one. A stage, a wind that kept lifting the tablecloths. Maya's knee pressed against mine under the paper plate. When the show ended, we drifted with everyone else toward the path. The sky was the color of guava and the palms made black lace against it. My phone buzzed once. Then again, then 3 times in a row. I saw the preview on the lock screen and felt my chest and my hands argue about what to do. An account name I did not recognize sat under a caption that read like a headline. Dream wedding at a Napa winery, then this happened. The handle was at Wine Country Witness. The thumbnail froze a long table and a blur of white flowers and a vineyard the color of money. Maya said we can watch it upstairs or we can watch it here. I said here. We stepped off the path and found a low wall that looked back at the hotel lights. I opened the video and the sound came first. A mic hissed, then the thin, steady voice of a planner telling guests to stay seated while they transitioned to the signing. The camera panned from the groomsmen to the arbor and settled when the crowd clapped. The movement felt like it came from the right side of the aisle. Whoever was filming knew enough to keep the phone level. Ryan entered the frame with his shoulders pulled back and that smile he uses when he thinks the right pose can rewrite the room. Olivia stood beside him with her bouquet held a little too high. The officiant lifted a folder and said a line I could not hear over the breeze. Then the lens found the bride's parents. Daniel Park was angled toward his daughter with his jaw tight the way fathers get when they are holding more than the moment. Beside him, Jenna leaned forward from her seat at the front row. I saw her mouth a question. Daniel touched her wrist and the two of them stood together. The camera shifted with them and I felt the familiar wrongness of seeing people you know in a view that is not yours to have. They reached the arbor as the officiant began to speak about the license. Daniel raised a hand. The mic caught the first clear words of the entire clip. Before we sign, may we pause? The crowd made a sound like fabric caught on a nail. The planner stepped in and then stepped back when Daniel continued. He said a sentence to the officiant that the wind lifted away. He bent toward Jenna and spoke into her ear. She nodded without blinking the way people do when they were braced and still hoping they misheard. The camera cut in and out as the person filming tried to get a cleaner shot. For a second, we had Olivia's face square in the frame. Her eyes were on Ryan. The color was gone from her lips. She said something that moved her mouth and not the rest of her. The clip jumped 3 seconds. Ryan's smile had fallen off his face, and he had that hollow look I had seen once before when we were boys, and he learned luck does not bend forever. The officiant lowered the folder. Someone in the back whispered loud enough to be a line on the audio track. What is happening? The counter on the screen rolled like a slot machine. 50,000, 73,000. The comments slid past faster than I could read. The caption tagged Napa and winery and dream turned disaster. I felt Maya's palm settle flat between my shoulders like she was working a knot. I kept watching. Daniel turned to address the guests. He spoke into the mic and the words flattened under wind and phones and the soft rumble of 100 throats. I caught only shapes, financial questions, clarification before any legal step. The planner appeared again and took a breath like she was going to redirect the universe. Then she did the smart thing and let the father keep the floor. The camera swung to the groomsmen and I saw Tyler rub the back of his neck and look at the sky like he was asking for a new script. Olivia glanced toward her mother and then down at the bouquet. She lifted her chin in a motion that looked practiced and small. She said it first, not Daniel. She said they needed to pause the signing until a few items were resolved. The audio popped and several voices rose over each other. Someone near the camera said, "No way," and someone else said, "She is doing the right thing." The clip ended on Ryan reaching for Olivia's elbow and not finding it. Maya slid closer and we watched it again. The second time I saw the tiny tremor in Jenna's hand when she pushed a strand of hair behind her ear. I saw Daniel anchor his stance before he spoke, feet set like a man who spends more time than you think at a gym. I saw my brother make a choice not to look at anyone but the lens whenever it found him, as if an audience could take the place of a witness. The view count climbed while we sat there. By the time we reached the elevator, the comments were arguing about whether the father saved his daughter or ruined a party, and people were typing the words wedding disaster and karma the way a tide repeats itself. In the lobby, a couple in vacation shirts smiled at the bellman, and I felt the strange split of living 2 days at once. One with plastic leis and torches, one with microphones and a paper no one would sign. Up in the room, the air was cool the way hotels make it. Maya set a bottle of water on the table and asked if I wanted to keep watching. I said yes, but later. I needed the shape of this to shrink to the size of the screen again. I stepped out onto the balcony and let the sound of the waves take the edge off the voices in my head. Somewhere 3 hours ahead, a plan had broken in a way that would not be put back together. The phone buzzed in my hand. A new notification from the same account promised a part 2. I set the phone on the table and watched a plane cross the dark and grow smaller until it was gone. I picked the phone back up when the screen lit again. The same account had posted a second clip. Maya sat beside me with her knees pulled to her chest, and we let the sound roll out of the tiny speaker. It started mid-ceremony. The planner had given the mic to the master of ceremonies, who was trying to stitch the moment back together with a smooth voice. He asked guests to direct their attention to the signing table and said they would keep things moving. The camera wobbled as the person filming stood on tiptoe and then steadied on the arbor. Daniel Park stepped forward before the host could finish the sentence. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The microphone caught him plainly as he said they should pause because there were questions about finances that must be clarified before any legal step. You could feel the crowd fold in on itself. A few guests clapped once in the kind of reflex that sometimes appears when people are anxious and do not know where to put it. Then the room went to that strange quiet where you hear only wind and the small rustle of clothes. The lens found Olivia. She looked at her father and then at Ryan. She leaned a fraction toward the table and the mic picked up her voice, soft but clear. She said she had just seen an alert on her credit about an account she did not recognize, and she needed to understand it. The camera picked up a run of whispers like a fuse. Someone near the back said they knew this would happen because money always tells the truth. A bridesmaid touched Olivia's elbow. Ryan stood very straight with his chin lifted as if posture could hold the day in place. The host tried again. He spoke about love and patience and reminded everyone that the signing was a simple formality. He gestured toward the folder with the certificate. Daniel did not move aside. He told the host that the family would be taking a brief recess to review documents. The veneer cracked then. You could hear hisses from the groom's side and a deep groan from a table near the aisle. Someone called out that the father was ruining a perfect day. Someone else said a father protects. Olivia looked at her mother first and then at Jenna. She nodded once and took a step toward the mic. She said that they would be postponing the signing until she could verify the account activity. She thanked guests for their understanding. She said she hoped to continue the celebration after a short break. Her voice did not shake. The camera held on her face long enough to show that every muscle was working to keep it that steady. Ryan reached for her hand, and she did not give it. The host asked the band to play something light. You could hear a saxophone stumble and then find a tune. The clip jumped to the groom's family row. My mother had a hand over her mouth. An aunt was saying loudly that this was an ambush. Tyler stood with both palms open like he was trying to calm a skittish animal. He looked toward the camera for a second as if it might offer directions. The video ended on a shot of the planner on a headset near the AV table. Her jaw was set. She was listening to two people and looking at a third. The caption underneath was a sentence that asked if anyone else heard the credit comment. The view count rolled past 6 figures while I watched. Notifications hit the screen in a cascade. The words wedding disaster and karma kept repeating until they looked like a pattern. Maya touched my shoulder. She said quietly that Olivia had done the sane thing and that the room hated sane things when money and pride were on display. I nodded and let my head fall back against the chair. I counted my breaths and tried to keep my face blank the way I had trained myself to do whenever family turned into a stage. Another clip appeared a few minutes later, but I did not open it. I needed to hold the line of what I already knew, that there had been warning signs, that I had tried once to pull Ryan toward a safer choice, and he had pushed my hand away. That this was not my show to run or rescue. Down on the sand, a group of teenagers ran a game with a glow ball, and their laughter reached us in thin, bright ribbons. Far away in Napa, a violin played a song that was supposed to mean grace and instead meant delay. The comments on the first clip were beginning to split into factions. People argued about whether a father should step in at all. Others said the real story was the mother of the groom telling off the planner in a moment another camera had captured. The words took on their own life. They did what words do once they leave a room. They fed each other. I texted Tyler and asked if he was all right. He answered with 2 words and I could hear his voice in them. Not great. He added that Jenna and Daniel had taken Olivia into a side room with the planner and that Ryan's uncles were advising him to hold the line. He wrote that the host kept repeating a script about love, conquering obstacles. He wrote that every phone in the place was up. Maya said we could turn everything off and try to sleep. We both knew sleep would not come easy. I turned the sound down and let the screen rest on the table where I could still see the light without feeling it in my hands. For a while we sat with the balcony door open and listened to the ocean working through the dark. At some point the breeze shifted. A new notification pulsed. The account had posted a 3rd clip. I stood and walked to the railing and let the night hold me long enough to decide if I wanted to watch it. I watched the 3rd clip load and felt the railing cool under my palms. It opened on the reception hall lit in warm gold. The band had switched to something soft. The camera framed a screen by the dance floor while the host announced the slideshow, the story of Ryan and Olivia. The first images were the expected sweetness. Toddlers in floaties at a lake, missing front teeth, Halloween costumes with crooked hats. The room relaxed into it. Laughter rose and fell like it was on a script. Then the picture jittered and a new frame appeared that did not belong. It was an email header on a white background. The subject line read, "Account opened confirmation," with a bank name I did not recognize. The sender line matched the same issuer I had seen on Ryan's kitchen table weeks earlier. A low ripple went through the crowd. The next slide was a cropped text thread. The top of the screen showed a contact name that could have been anyone. The text itself was legible even in the shaky video. It asked to borrow a social security number to secure honeymoon financing and promised it would be temporary and invisible. A man near the back said a single word that carried. Fraud. The clip cut to the head table. Jenna had her hands flat on her lap with her eyes locked on the screen. Olivia sat still, the kind of still that comes when every part of your body is listening. Ryan leaned toward the AV stand and snapped his fingers at the tech. The tech looked as shocked as everyone else. He tapped keys and moved a mouse, and the next image landed anyway. It was a list of payments marching down a timeline that made no sense for a person with a steady income and simple tastes. Several dates matched times I knew Ryan had been scrambling and smiling. Someone yelled to turn it off. The band stopped without meaning to. The planner hurried toward the AV table with her headset askew. The clip swung hard and caught Daniel standing now, his mouth set in a line that was not going to bend. The screen behind him displayed a bank logo and a welcome message to a new cardholder that did not match Olivia's accounts. You could see guests around the room doing the math in their heads. A bridesmaid stood and halfway blocked the screen with her body as if she could shield the night with a dress. I felt Maya step beside me. She did not touch me, and she did not have to. She asked if I wanted to stop. I said I needed to see where this went because there is a point in any collapse where noise becomes truth and then it is over. Back in Napa, the host tried to speak and his voice failed on the first word. The video lurched to the groomsmen. Tyler had both hands in the air like he was asking for time out. The look on his face said he had seen enough of locker rooms and boardrooms to know when a team had lost the room. He turned away from the camera and said something to Ryan. The mic did not catch it. Ryan shook his head once and then twice harder. There was a fast blur as the feed cut back to the screen. A screenshot of an approval workflow with a box next to a line that read Spouse Guarantor. The name in the field was Olivia's with a misspelling that would have been funny on any other day. The comments under the clip started to roll even as the video played. People posted that this was staged. Others posted that this is why you check everything and that the modern world exposes what used to stay quiet. The hashtag wedding disaster lit up the corner like a siren. Karma followed right behind it. My phone pulsed in my hand with a direct message from the account. The sender asked for context. They said they would hide my identity and wanted to make sure the story was right. I stared at the words and felt the old urge to take responsibility crawl up my chest. I put the phone on the table face down and let it buzz a second time and then go still. A text from Tyler arrived next. He wrote that it had blown for real. He said he was not the one posting and that half the guests had their phones out. He said the planner had pulled the power from the projector and that never looks clean. I typed that he should take care of himself and stay clear. I erased it and sent a shorter line that did the same thing. The clip ended with a black screen and a cheerless silence. Maya went inside and brought out 2 glasses of water and set one by my elbow. She said that what we were watching had begun long before tonight and that we were only seeing the flashpoint. I nodded and felt that mixture of relief and grief that comes when you are not surprised by a thing and still wish you were. We sat there while the ocean kept its own time. A helicopter passed far out and looked like a toy with a moving bead of light. Down below, a couple walked in the shallows with their shoes in their hands. My phone buzzed again with requests from numbers I did not know. A local reporter, a podcaster, someone who said they worked for a magazine and wanted to hear the brothers' perspective. I slid the device across the table until it rested against the salt shaker and then I left it there. Inside the room smelled like sunscreen and clean sheets. Maya turned off the lamp and the balcony made a rectangle of dark. I told her I felt both heavier and lighter. She said that made sense. She asked if I thought Jenna had known. I said I did not think so. She is careful in the way people are when they have been through fire before. We listened to the surf until the rhythm made thinking harder. When I finally stood, I closed the door most of the way and let a thin band of sound in. The notifications continued to blink under the glass, and I let them. I let the screen hum on the nightstand and watched the sky turn from charcoal to a thin gray that made the ocean look like brushed steel. Maya slept with one hand on the sheet between us. I slipped out to the balcony and let the air sit heavy on my skin while the last 12 hours sorted themselves in my head. When you spend years putting out small fires, the smell clings even when you stop moving. Ryan and I were boys in a house where being the oldest meant you ran point without being asked. I tied his skates in the cold hallway at the rink and loosened them when he said they pinched. I took the hit from a neighbor kid after Ryan mouthed off and did not explain to anyone why I had a busted lip. He said thanks in his own language, a shoulder bump, a look that lasted a second. The first time a coach praised me, Ryan went quiet the whole drive home. Later, he asked to see my trophy and held it with two hands like it was heavier than it looked. In high school, he learned how to make attention bend. He tried out for the same team I had and told anyone who would listen that he would change the program. When the season started and he did not get the starting slot, he called the coach old school and said the politics were thick. He said it with a grin that made people nod along. I watched him learn that a confident story can outrun an ordinary result if no one checks the splits. Our mother cultivated that story because she believed she was protecting him. She called him tender. She said the world can be hard on boys who feel big. Whenever a consequence tried to land, she placed a cushion. A missed payment became a bank error. A late assignment became a creative mind working on a different clock. My job was to be steady and to keep calm in the room. The effect was simple. Ryan grew into a man who was used to the ground rising to meet his feet. His career echoed the pattern. He walked into a mid-sized firm and introduced himself like someone who had already arrived. Entry level became analyst on his resume after 6 months. Analyst became senior after a year. He did not wait for the review cycle to catch up. He updated his LinkedIn on a weeknight and let the world adjust. By the time the company realized he had momentum that felt easier to ride than to correct. He told our parents he was leading partnerships, then adjusted the adjectives until it sounded like he was the partnerships. It was all technically possible and practically false, which is a line that rewards confidence. Lauren slid into this orbit and made it safer. She was a co-worker with a talent for spotlight and a willingness to hold it at the right angle. In meetings, she backed his ideas with phrases that sounded like consensus. On social, she posted team wins that framed his face at the center. I met her once and felt the room tilt toward her approval. She called him a force and said the company would not be the same in 5 years. I understood then how a person can serve as a mirror that always makes you taller. The envy lived quiet behind all of that. It looked like jokes that cut a sliver too deep and then asked for a pass. It sounded like praise with a tag at the end that moved the goalposts. When I bought our mother a new washer because the old one died in a wet stutter. He admired the gesture and then told her he would have found a better deal if he had known. When I paid a fee to fix a lease mistake he made, he said the policy was predatory and that he would have fought if he had time. The message was constant. If I did a thing, he could have done it better. He just did not happen to do it. By the time he met Olivia, the image had its own gravity. He told her a polished version of himself, and I do not blame her for believing it. People fall in love with what they are shown. He rented a nicer place and called it an investment in their future. He had a ring financed and called it smart leverage given the rate. Each choice borrowed against the next mile. He kept moving, and the debt followed a step behind like a shadow in noon light. The first vibration came mid-morning. Tyler had forwarded a screenshot from a work address I recognized from the handful of happy hour invites Ryan had sent over the last year. The subject line sat heavy: administrative leave pending investigation. The email itself was clinical. It said he would be relieved of duties with pay while the company reviewed the situation. It told him to return his laptop and badges and to make himself available for a compliance interview. It was not an accusation. It did not need to be. The timing did all the work. I stared at it until the words lost edges and then zoomed in as if scale would grant mercy. A second image followed. Ryan had replied within minutes with a paragraph that bristled. He wrote that gossip had escalated and that the videos were misleading. HR responded with a calendar link and no adjectives. Tyler added a line that people at the office were spooked not just by the content but by the comments that had named the company. He asked if I was okay and said he was around if I needed him. I thanked him and felt the balcony under my feet like a reminder. Maya came out with her hair wet at the ends and took in my face before she took the phone. She read and handed it back. She said the company had to do this to slow the bleeding. She used the word triage and I nodded. We stood there for a while with the ocean doing its ancient work and the phone dimming between us. My mother called like a storm that decided on our roof. She said the press had overreached and that a few clips had already been pulled as if takedowns erased the echo. She asked what I was going to do, which in our family was a coded way of asking when I would fix it. I told her I was not calling anyone at his office and not smoothing a thing. I told her Ryan needed a lawyer more than he needed a brother who could write an email. She said a lawyer would make him look guilty. I said looking guilty was less costly than being unprepared. The silence that followed was not agreement. It was the sound of a script misfiring. When the call ended, I remembered a night when we were kids and a thunderstorm knocked the power out. Ryan was so afraid of the dark that he crawled under my blanket and gripped my arm until the lights came back. I stayed awake and watched the window flash. I thought about that boy while I looked at the adult version who had chosen a darkness of his own making and then insisted the room was fine. The backstory did not absolve him. It only explained the slope. Our mother's softness, my reflex to absorb his taste for the easy version of a hard thing, Lauren's praise that filled the gaps. All of it braided into the moment a vineyard screen became a mirror. The email from HR was not a verdict. It was a line on a map. Cross it and you accept what comes next. I set the phone down and felt the first calm breath I had taken all morning. The ocean kept moving without needing a story. I watched a set of small waves fold neatly and thought about the strange relief of a truth that finally stops hiding. Morning rinsed the sky pale and the surf looked patient again. By then, the videos had stacked millions of views. Maya scrolled in small doses and read me the numbers without commentary. 5 million in a day. The captions turned from disbelief to analysis and then to certainty as strangers decided what had happened. I made coffee, carried it to the balcony, and let the steam blow sideways in the trade wind. Olivia was already moving. Daniel had called their family attorney the night before. With Olivia's consent, they pulled her credit report and flagged accounts that did not belong to her. She placed a fraud alert with the big bureaus and filed an identity theft report along with a police report. It was all procedural and also felt like something more final the moment a person decides to trust paper rather than promises. Near noon, my phone rang with a California number I did not know. The man introduced himself as Detective Ruiz from the Napa County Sheriff's Office. He said he had my number from Jenna, who had it from Tyler, and he asked if this was a good time. I stood and walked to the shade where the screen was less of a mirror. He explained that he was following up on the reports filed and that he was trying to build a timeline before memories blurred into the story the internet wanted. He asked if I had ever seen any financial mail or documents at Ryan's place. I told him the simple version. Ryan had given me a spare key months ago so I could check his apartment when he traveled. 3 weeks before the wedding, he asked me to drop a ladder back by leaving it inside his door. I used the key with his permission and saw an overdue notice on the kitchen counter. It was in plain view beside the bowl where he keeps keys and receipts. I did not take a photo, I did not touch it. I registered the issuing bank because the name stuck. Later at home, I read public terms online for that issuer and recognized a pattern that worried me. I called Ryan and suggested he pay down balances and freeze new credit until after the wedding. He told me to mind my own work. I kept my tone factual and told the detective he could verify that call in my phone log. He asked if I would be willing to provide any messages that related to the debts or to concerns I had raised. He said he would send a formal request by email so that chain and consent were clear. He did not push. I told him I would comply when I received the paperwork. He asked one more narrow question. Had I ever handled any of Olivia's information? I said no, and that the first I heard of her credit trouble was the moment the world heard it. After the call, I told Maya everything. We sat side by side while the tide drew a clean line on the sand. She said I did well to keep my answers short and to trust the process. I said it felt strange to talk about my brother to a stranger with a badge and also like a relief to finally see things plainly. She took my hand and pressed her thumb into my palm the way she does when she is saying, "Stay with me." The official email from the detective arrived an hour later. It was professional and careful and included a signed request for any records of communication about finances between me and Ryan. I forwarded it to my personal account where I keep backups and then took a breath before opening the thread. The messages were not dramatic. My note about cutting down balances, his reply telling me to focus on my own lane. A later line where I asked if he had set up payment reminders. A short answer that he was fine. Dates and times that would anchor memory to something neutral. I exported the thread as a PDF, checked that the header showed my number and his, and sent it to the detective, with a simple line confirming that it was complete to the best of my knowledge. Tyler texted to say a local station had reached out to him and that he had passed. He added that a reporter had asked for my number. I told him I did not want it given out. An unknown handle pinged my social with a polite request for context. I did not reply. My mother left a voicemail that sounded tight. She said people were whispering and that family should protect family. I did not listen twice. I set the phone face down and let it rest inside the small circle of moisture my glass had left on the table. By late afternoon, Daniel's attorney had found the honeymoon financing application with a timestamp that lined up uncomfortably with the night Ryan had told us he was at a team dinner. Olivia added that detail to her report and authorized access to past statements, so that any questionable lines could be traced. The methodical parts of me respected the way they were moving. No flailing, no threats. Just the slow work of building a picture from receipts and logins and forms. When the sun fell behind the hotel and the beach turned bronze, Maya and I walked to the waterline and stood with our feet in the wash. Kids ran zigzags around us. A man with a ukulele tuned quietly on a blanket. A plane climbed out toward the horizon with that patient angle that always makes me think about faith. I told Maya I felt cleaner after sending the messages. She said silence can still be a kind of action when it keeps you from feeding a fire. We stayed until the first stars showed, even with the city still awake behind us. Back in the room, I checked my email once more. The detective had confirmed receipt and said he might have follow-up questions after the forensic team looked at the documents. He thanked me for my time. The matter of thanks felt odd given the subject, but it also landed like a small hand on the shoulder. I closed the laptop and turned off the lamp. The ocean kept its rhythm. I lay there and let the sound carry the day a little farther from me. Not gone just far enough to allow sleep. Morning light slipped under the curtains and the room felt washed clean. Maya was still asleep on her side of the bed with one hand under her cheek. I checked my phone with that small dread that comes when you know the world kept moving while you were still. There were new emails stacked on the lock screen and a handful of texts from Tyler and Jenna. I took the phone to the balcony so the alerts would not wake her. Daniel had sent a short update through Jenna. The Park family had initiated a chargeback on the $12,500 deposit that had been put on a card in his name. The venue had replied through their manager that the contract allowed them to hold funds when an event is halted for reasons not caused by the venue. Both sides were using the careful words of people about to involve lawyers. It might end as a civil dispute if intent to deceive was proven. For now, the money sat in a kind of limbo while paperwork stacked. Tyler added that Ryan's company had shifted its stance. Yesterday, he was on paid leave. Today, the message from HR asked him to discuss separation terms. Internal investigators had confirmed he had been overstating his title in external communications and that there were irregular payments to a small vendor tied to a groomsman's cousin. The company wanted a quiet exit with a cooperation clause and a release. It sounded like that corporate move I had seen before when the facts are ugly and the brand wants distance. A few minutes later, Lauren forwarded me a note that she had sent to the HR inbox with the investigator copied. She had written an apology for helping Ryan polish his resume beyond the truth, and for repeating that inflated title to clients at a holiday event. She stated that the financial picture he had shared with her was not accurate, and that she had believed him until the wedding day. She also wrote a clear line that she had not taken part in any use of Olivia's identity. Reading it, I could hear the way she tries to sound brisk when she is scared. I thanked her in my head for at least putting her name on a fact. Linda called while I was still outside. I watched the screen light and go dark and then light again. I let it pass to voicemail. If I picked up, she would say the family needed to close ranks and that outsiders were trying to ruin Ryan. If I stayed off the call, I could keep my footing. I sent her a text that said I was safe in Honolulu and would talk when we were home. She sent back a heart which felt like a bandage on a broken hinge. Maya came out with a towel around her hair and asked if I wanted coffee or a walk first. I chose the ocean. We carried our shoes and let the water lap over our ankles. A kid launched a bright foam rocket and cheered when it flopped into the sand. I told Maya about the chargeback and the venue and Ryan's job. She listened without flinching. She said consequences have a way of arriving in a bundle once the first thread pulls free. We walked to the pier and back. I felt that mix of sorrow and relief that comes when the truth stops being only yours to hold. By midday, the internet had begun to eat its own tail. A gossip account posted a blurry screenshot of a letterhead that might have been from Ryan's company, and commenters argued over whether it was real. A wine blogger weighed in with a thread about event contracts and force majeure, and the difference between a cancellation fee and damages for misrepresentation. In the middle of it, Olivia posted a plain update. She said she had filed the appropriate reports and that she would not be discussing details while law enforcement and counsel did their work. That single paragraph felt steadier than all the noise. Around 2, I received a call from a number I recognized as Ryan's. I let it ring out. He followed with a text that asked for help with messaging and said he knew I would know what to say. I stared at the words until they blurred and then put the phone down. There are lines you draw late in life that you wish you had drawn sooner. Maya saw my face and simply reached for my hand. We sat that way until the weak part of me stopped trying to compose a response that would make me feel useful. Late afternoon brought a fresh note from Jenna. The venue had offered a mediated conversation for early next week. Daniel's attorney had accepted with the condition that any discussion would include documented credit issues and timelines already gathered. She added that Olivia had closed all shared planning accounts and had moved her belongings from the apartment she had not yet fully lived in. That last piece hit harder than I expected. The image of boxed dresses and kitchen tools stacked by a door settled into my chest. As the sun tilted, I opened the laptop and skimmed the draft separation agreement Ryan's HR had sent him, forwarded by Lauren, with a shaky line that she was out of her depth. There it was in standard form, severance tied to non-disclosure and non-disparagement cooperation in any future audits. A neutral reference, a date certain when benefits would end. I closed the file and did not reply. It was not my contract to parse and not my job to soften. Evening came with a soft wind and the kind of sky that tricks you into believing things will always make sense if you wait long enough. We ate poke on the balcony and watched surfers sit like small commas on the water. My phone buzzed once more with a message from Tyler that simply said, "Hang in there." I sent back a gratitude emoji and set the phone face down. When the lights of the shore grew more distinct than the shapes of people, I leaned on the railing and listened to the slow dissolve of wave on sand. The day had delivered its terms. Money would be argued over, jobs would change hands, statements would be filed, read and filed again. Somewhere in Napa, a family folded linens that never saw a cake cutting. I let the picture sit without trying to edit it, and felt the first hint of room inside my own chest. We woke before the sun warmed the glass and carried rented paddleboards down to the beach while the sky was still a soft gray. The water off Waikiki was almost flat and the reef made a gentle hushing sound that felt like permission. We knelt first, then stood and let our boards slide past the last line of swimmers. Diamond Head was a dark shoulder against a pale horizon. I could feel my balance settle the way it does when effort finally matches need. Maya paddled alongside me with an easy rhythm and asked if I regretted staying quiet. I told her I did not. I said the truth has its own feet, and it knows where to go. We drifted for a while without speaking, letting a small breeze push us back toward the hotels, then turned and worked our way along the buoys until our legs hummed. A turtle surfaced near my board, took one calm look at us, and slipped under again. I felt something in me mirror that motion. Back at the room, I checked my phone and saw the view count across the wedding clips had climbed again. 48 hours out and the total had cleared 8.3 million. The @Wine Country Witness account had posted a longer cut that stitched together angles from half a dozen guests. Commentary channels on YouTube were already building timelines and pausing frames to read contracts and menus like tea leaves. Some of it was thoughtful, much of it was noise. We watched one recap with breakfast because curiosity won. A calm voice walked through the ceremony, delay the father at the microphone the moment Olivia asked to pause the signing. A small inset showed a screenshot of a credit monitoring alert with names redacted. The narrator said that multiple attendees had sent clips and that the story had run away from the people in it. That last line felt closest to true. I closed the app and set the phone face down so my coffee could taste like coffee again. We spent late morning walking the length of the beach to the pier. Kids practiced shaka signs for photos. A wedding party from somewhere else posed in bare feet with a rented bouquet and a rented sunset. I felt a complicated tenderness for them and moved on before the photographer asked us to step out of the frame. Maya slipped her arm through mine and asked if I wanted to snorkel or sleep. I chose neither and suggested we sit under a palm and do nothing for a while. Doing nothing can be a kind of work when everything wants a reaction. By early afternoon, the updates thickened. A legal channel explained chargebacks and holdbacks and the difference between fraud and a breach of contract. A tech writer traced the way a slideshow could be swapped if someone had physical access to a laptop or if a streaming link had been shared. Tyler texted a short line that said he was staying off camera and that he hoped I was doing the same. I sent back a simple yes and put the phone away again. The call from Linda came when we were rinsing sand from our feet at the outdoor spigot. Her name did not appear on my screen because she called Maya. I watched Maya listen and keep her face still. Linda said she needed me to come home and speak for Ryan. She said family must project unity and that I had the words people would respect. She said the internet would stop if I told it to. Maya let her finish and then told her she had called the wrong person, that I would not be managing this for anyone and that we were safe and staying quiet. She kept her voice soft and her words firm. When she ended the call, she handed me the phone as if it were simply a phone and not a rope. I thanked her without speaking. We walked to a plate lunch spot and ate under a faded awning while a fan stirred the air. The news cycle churned on in the small screens around us. I let it all skim past. The impulse to explain is strong for people like me, and the urge to fix is stronger. It felt strange and clean to let neither win. Late afternoon, we rented 2 beach chairs and sank into that warm stupor that comes after sun and salt. I scrolled for a moment and saw a new edit from the same Napa account that placed the slideshow swap near the end of the reception. It credited multiple guests for the angles and linked an email address for anyone with information. I thought about the thumb drive Jenna kept on her keychain and the care with which she had tried to build a simple montage of childhood. The thought made my chest ache and then ease. Not all mistakes are malicious. Not all revelations are accidents either. As shadows stretched, Maya asked again if I felt any pull to jump in. I told her the pull was there and that I was letting it pass like a small wave that looks bigger from a distance. We walked the shoreline at dusk when the water cools your shins and every step feels like a decision you can live with. The city lit itself a piece at a time. The clip counters would turn regardless. The takes would multiply. Somewhere a venue manager was answering a lawyer. Somewhere a florist was boxing unused centerpieces. We stopped at the jetty and watched a last burst of orange slide behind the ridge. I told Maya I could almost hear the day clicking into place like a gear that finally finds its teeth. She squeezed my hand and said that quiet has a sound if you listen long enough. On the way back, we passed a musician playing a steel guitar that made the air shimmer. I let the notes float over the noise inside my head and decided we would sleep with the balcony door open again. The ocean kept its own counsel and I was learning to keep mine. Morning light slid across the carpet and I let it move without getting up. My phone rested on the nightstand like a closed door. When I finally reached for it, there was a single new email pinned to the top. The subject line carried no heat. Olivia wrote that she was sorry I had been left off the list and that she understood why I had stayed quiet. She thanked me for not pouring more fuel on a fire that was already too bright. She said the last 2 days had rearranged the room inside her head, and that answers were louder than vows. I read it twice and felt a small drop of grief for the version of their day she had been planning, the one with simple music and toasts that only stung in the normal way. An audio file followed a few minutes later. Jenna said she did not know if I would ever want to hear her voice again, so she was leaving it all in one note. She walked me through the decision no one saw her make. At rehearsal, she had checked the playback setup with the AV tech and asked where the backup would live in case the Wi-Fi hiccuped. He had shrugged and pointed to the laptop on the riser, and she had touched the small silver drive on her keyring and told herself to keep it close. That morning, while getting ready, she had seen something in the shared iCloud folder that did not belong. Ryan had dropped a bundle of photos for the slideshow, and a few files had traveled with them. There were confirmation emails for new lines of credit, the kind with welcome language and first purchase offers, and the metadata still wore the dates like fresh tags. He had not meant to share them. He had simply dragged a whole desktop folder into the cloud. Jenna said she stood in a bathroom with a curling iron cooling on the counter and watched the light change on the tile while she considered what to do. She had tried to believe there was an innocent explanation. She had tried to put the files back in their imaginary drawer. Then a credit alert lit Olivia's phone during a hair touch-up, and Olivia had gone very still. That was the moment Jenna said she could not let the day end with signatures that would braid a lie into something hard to undo. When the reception started and the first dance ended, she walked to the laptop with her own drive in her palm. The tech was turned the other way, managing levels. She swapped the file that held childhood smiles for one that began the same way but carried a different truth in the middle. She knew it would be called sabotage. She also knew Olivia needed the full picture before a pen touched paper again. I sat with her voice and let the anger I had been saving look for a place to land. It did not find much. What she had done was reckless. It was also strangely careful. She had shown only what already existed. She had not added a single pixel. She had chosen the sharpest mirror within reach. A buzz cut through the quiet, and a new email from a Napa address appeared. Detective Ruiz invited me to a secure portal and requested confirmation of the text chain between me and Ryan that mentioned the overdue notice. She asked to preserve the timestamps as they appeared on my device without alteration and to certify the origin of the images I had sent for the slideshow. The form opened with plain language. I verified my identity, checked boxes that confirmed the messages were unedited, and scrolled through the familiar thread while the system captured it. I attached the small set of scans I had shared with Jenna and noted the date and time I had sent them. At the end, there was a line for an electronic signature. I wrote my name and felt a quiet click inside, like a bead finding the next notch on a string. Maya came out from the balcony with wet hair and an expression that had both pride and ache in it. I told her about Olivia's message and Jenna's recording. We sat on the edge of the bed while I played the voice note again so she could hear Jenna's breath catch in the place where she said she had watched Olivia's face change. Maya put a hand on my back and said that sometimes the person who opens the door is not the person you expect. She asked if I felt any need to answer the email or respond to the recording. I said I would send a line to Olivia later, something simple that wished her strength. I said I did not owe anyone a reaction beyond that. By late afternoon, I had a reply from the portal that my submission was received and logged. A case number sat at the top of the page, and the timeline felt less like a loose rope. Nothing dramatic followed. No media call, no angry thread from Ryan. The story was moving with a force that did not need me. We walked down to the water when the shadows went long. A wedding was setting up near the Duke statue, small and hopeful, and oblivious to anything beyond its own circle of chairs. I wished those strangers an easy night in my head and kept walking. The trades were steady and the water looked like hammered metal where the last light hit it. Maya and I stood without speaking for a long time. The email and the note and the signed form settled to the bottom of my mind like silt. The surface smoothed itself. The sky went from gold to slate to something that has no name. Back in the room, I slid the glass door open and let the sounds come in. There was a hiss where the shore met the reef and a soft thud where larger sets reached the wall. I lay back and watched the darkness do its work. The phone was face down on the nightstand, cool and still. The waves kept counting for those of us who needed something steady to count. Morning smoothed into a blue that felt like a fresh sheet, and by the time we boarded for the mainland, I could feel the quiet inside me hold. The flight home was uneventful in the best way. Maya slept against my shoulder while I watched the map crawl across the ocean, and then the desert, and then the soft green around the city I knew by heart. Austin came up in pieces, the curve of the river, the narrow lace of a neighborhood street, the heat that meets you at the jetway. At home, the house smelled like dust and lemon cleaner. I carried the bags in and set them by the bench, then stood there with my keys in my hand and decided something small that felt large. I opened my contacts, found my mother, and slid the setting that would keep her calls from reaching me for a while. I did it as a kindness to the part of me that answers out of habit. I needed a fence I could see. Ryan landed 2 hours later in the form of a message that lit the screen and went still. He wrote a short line that suggested I had won. I stared at it and felt tired in the old way. I typed nothing. I watched the bubble of thought appear and disappear from his side. And then nothing came. The phone went dark and stayed there. I wrote a separate note to Olivia that wished her steadiness. No advice, no story. Only the hope that the next room she walked into would feel like it belonged to her. Daniel answered from his own address before dinner. He said thank you in the clipped rhythm of a man who has been holding a family aside for days. He said he appreciated that I had not tried to shape the public version. He did not promise anything. He did not ask anything. It was enough. The next morning I pulled the garage door up and the smell of cardboard and old grass clippings rolled out. The ladder Ryan had borrowed months ago was back where I had hung it for him. I never loved that ladder. It was too heavy for its height and it jammed at the hinge, and still I had kept it because he needed storage and I had space. I stood there with my palms on the rails and felt how many small accommodations had added up to a story I never meant to write. I lifted it down and set it against the wall by the trash, then changed my mind and carried it to the curb. Let it find another house where it might be useful. On the workbench, a hook held a ring of keys that told a map of the last decade. Office, car, shed, my mother in case she locked herself out. Ryan because he traveled and packages had to be rescued before the rain found them. I sat on the stool and eased his spare key off the ring. The sound it made against the others was small and clean. I put it in an envelope with his name and wrote the address of his building. No note inside, only the metal that said, "This is where my reach ends." Maya came out with 2 glasses of water, leaned against the doorframe, and watched me the way she does when she knows I am taking stock. She asked if I wanted company at the post office or if I wanted to go alone. I told her I would drop the envelope later and then take the long way back along the lake. She nodded and smiled into her glass. I spent the early afternoon clearing a shelf of old paint cans and a stack of broken picture frames we had promised to fix and never did. Every few minutes I checked my phone without meaning to. It stayed quiet except for an automatic alert that a package had been delivered from a store we never remember ordering from. Normal life kept announcing itself in small ways and I let it in. When I finally drove to the post office, the line was short. The clerk weighed the envelope and slid it into a blue bin without comment. I watched it disappear and felt the tug in my chest release one more notch. Outside, the air was bright and the sidewalk glittered with the tiny crushed stones that always escape the landscape beds. I took the long route home. Rowers moved like a single thought across the water. A dog dragged its owner toward a patch of shade and then flopped onto the grass with a sigh you could hear from the trail. My body recognized all of it and settled. In the evening, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and made a list that was more prayer than plan. Call the bank about the joint account we kept for family emergencies. Change the alarm code. Put the wedding day screenshots in a separate monterier labeled with the rig number, so I do not stumble over them when I am looking for vacation photos. The little tasks felt like stitches, not fancy, necessary. Before bed, I unblocked my mother long enough to send a short message that said I needed distance and would reach out when I had it. I did not wait for a reply. I blocked the number again and set the phone down. Maya brushed her teeth and hummed under her breath. The house ticked as it cooled. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a car door shut and another opened and a grill lid clanged. Nothing dramatic. The world going on. Silence had been my choice in Napa, and it was still my choice now. Not to hide. To stay inside my own lane while truth finished its work without my help. I could feel the shape of that choice in my shoulders and in the way I fell asleep as soon as the light was out. If you have been cut from a list by people who should have held you close, you can leave your own account here. You can draw a quiet line and let silence be a boundary, or you can speak when the moment calls for it. Silence is not surrender. Sometimes it is the clear edge that lets truth burn on its own.